Welcome back, everybody, to J Movie Talk. This is episode 348. I'm continuing on with August. Shout out to everybody who listened to episode 347, where I talked about Happy Gilmore 2. Hope you guys enjoyed that. If you haven't listened to it yet, go back and check it out. But this episode, this is a movie that I've been wanting to do on the podcast for a long time now, and I'm glad I finally decided to actually do it for this podcast. And if you listen to the opener and everything, that heard the trailer, I'm talking about 1981's Thief, directed by Michael Mann. So the interesting thing about this movie is that I had never heard of this movie until probably, I want to say maybe a decade ago, I think, and everything, because I'm a big Michael Mann fan, and I enjoy, a lot of his movies. In particular, I'm talking about, of course, Heat, which came out in 1995. Ali, 2001, which I think is an underrated Michael Mann movie, actually, and everything. Of course, some Miami Vice, and everything like that. So when I came across Thief, and I was like, "What the hell is this?" And I mean, if you ever see the poster for it, it's like, okay, what is this? It's very interesting. It's a very interesting looking poster. It's like, well, what the heck is this, right? So when I watched it, and of course it stars James Caan, and the fact that Willie Nelson shows up in here, which I'll talk about him a little bit later. You have Jim, not John, Belushi in this as well, and I was thoroughly impressed with this movie, and the fact that this was Michael Mann's first movie that he did, well, I should say first big movie, the movie that kind of put him on the map. And it's ironically, I feel like this is what allowed him to do Miami Vice as well as Manhunter, and everything. I feel like if he didn't do this movie, I don't think he would have been able to do either one, especially Miami Vice. So the movie had a budget of $5.5 million, which I looked it up to see, like, oh, what does that equal in today's money? So, and if that movie budget was given to him in 2025, that is roughly around $17 million. And the movie made 11.2, I believe. And when I looked that up, that's roughly around $43 million. So either way, the movie was a success. But ironically, for me and everything, when I was around the time I was getting like heavy into movies and things like that, I was never hearing about Thief. You rarely hear about the movie. In recent years, you kind of starting to hear like the rumblings of people talk about Thief, but I would say like in the late 90s, early 2000s, and like I say, even past that, the 2010s, you rarely heard anybody talking about Thief, and everything. But it's a very important movie as far as the genre. I mean, the crime genre. I mean, there's movies that came after it that pretty much borrowed heavily from it, but for some reason it was never really talked about a lot. And even when it comes to Michael Mann, I don't think you hear people bring up Thief initially. And 9 times out of 10 it's either going to be Miami Vice or Heat that people bring up talking about Michael Mann. But the movie has a very unique visual style to it. And in some aspects, I mean, especially that beach scene, it feels almost like a surreal dream, in a way. And just from how it looks, it doesn't look like too many movies from back at that time. Michael Mann has a very unique style, and I would say even Manhunter also, it has that same visual style to it, where it doesn't really look like anything of the time that it was filmed in. And then when you see it like in 4K or whatever, it's like, man, this looks great, and it's like, wow. And everything. And then also too, I mean, I can't go any further talking about this, without talking about Tangerine Dream, who does the soundtrack. And it's crazy. Like, even though Tangerine Dream is a real band, but I think they're probably best known for doing movie soundtracks, because all the songs that I pretty much know of theirs is from movie soundtracks. I mean, I would say the score they do for this movie, Risky Business, just those two alone is ones that I kind of always revisit and I listen to just on a regular basis, just because I enjoy their music. And you really don't have too many groups now that do that for movies or anything. We don't really get soundtracks anymore like that either. So that's an unfortunate thing. It'd be nice if soundtracks made a comeback. I mean, the fact that vinyl made a comeback and everything, it'd be nice if, actual movie soundtracks made a comeback as well. And I don't know, Sinners might be the closest to recent that has, a great soundtrack, a great score and soundtrack, and everything. So let's get into talking about some of the important stuff about this movie. So James Caan as the main character of Frank, who's this very intense guy, because from dialogue in the movie, you get to know that he did do time and everything. And his mentor, who is a character named Oakley, played by Willie Nelson, he's still in prison, but he's sick and everything. And I thought it was interesting, like how James Caan pretty much talked about this movie. He regarded this movie as being one of his favorite role, if not one of his favorites. It's one of the favorite movies that he made, and everything. And just listening to him talk about this movie, you could tell, like, no, this movie really did something for him as an actor and everything. Because before this, he was primarily known as Sonny from The Godfather, right? And even though he did do other things, and I actually covered another James Caan movie on the podcast a long time ago, Killer Elite, with him and Robert Duvall. You could almost say that the character that he plays in The Killer Elite, Lockett, is almost somewhat similar to his character here to a degree, but the way he carries himself in this movie is very different from the Lockett character from Killer Elite. But I do see a bit of similarities with those characters. If you've never seen The Killer Elite, I would recommend checking it out. I mean, it's a Sam Peckinpah movie that came out, 70, I think it was 77, I believe it came out, and everything. And that's an underrated movie. I think people don't really talk about as much. I think if you say if you say Killer Elite, you probably think more about the Jason Statham, Robert De Niro movie and Clive Owen movie, more so than the one from back in the 70s with Duvall and Caan and directed by Sam Peckinpah, right? Like I say, just the way his character kind of navigates through everything. And that's something that Michael Mann does too. Like, a few of his main characters, they all have that, I want to say, that code that they live by. And Frank in this movie, he lives by his own code and he moves, a certain type of way. And I would say that the Frank character here and the Neil McCauley character in Heat share similar, I want to say, philosophies in a way. And they both, kind of want certain things that unfortunately, doesn't go the way they want, and it all comes crashing down for different reasons. But I mean, they both are thieves, right? But they do want certain things in life that a normal human being would want. I mean, Frank wants to have a family. He wants to adopt a kid and everything. Because I would say two things that stand out in this movie, that's not even like action oriented or anything, or I would say the scene where him and Tuesday Weld, who plays his girlfriend / wife eventually or whatever, No, I don't think they actually get married. I think she's always just his girlfriend in the movie. Where they go to the adoption agency and the whole exchange with them and the woman that works there, and the fact that the woman pretty much, is very dismissive of him because of the fact that he's an ex-con, and he kind of crashes out a bit because he's talking about the fact that he was raised in foster care and he knows what it's like, and the fact that you are denying him access to a child just because of your perceived notion of him. And I mean, to a degree, he is right, because he's like, I just want to do better for a kid, because I grew up in this system, and so I know what it's like, and I would love to have a kid. I have a wife, I have a woman with me that's gonna, so if there's any reservation towards me, she's here. But you're going to deny me when I'm coming here trying to do something the right way and everything, but you're going to deny me access to adopt a kid. And of course he goes off on a whole crazy tangent and everything, or whatever. But it is a very emotional scene, and it was interesting that a scene like that was in this movie, talking about foster care and what it is to be raised in the system and basically be kind of cast aside and things like that. And then the other scene is probably the diner scene, where he's pretty much talking to her and he's pretty much laying everything out on the table, and is, like I said, it's probably one of the best monologues in a movie. It's probably one of his best, and it's just the raw emotion that he's giving, and she's just sitting there just listening to him, and is, like I say, it really makes you like, damn, like okay, he's putting all his chips on the table, and she actually, I feel like that's where she fully commits, to being with him and wanting to grow a life with him, and everything. But I mean, I talked about how he's similar to the Neil McCauley character, but he's very different from, I would say, the Pacino character in Heat, because the Pacino character in Heat is a freaking madman, and he could have easily been the criminal if you think about it. And then of course Colin Farrell as Crockett in Miami Vice is very different from that, but I would also say he's very much different from the Will Graham in Manhunter, because if you watch Manhunter, you watch Red Dragon, even though William Pearson plays Will Graham and Edward Norton plays Will Graham, those are two different versions of the Will Graham character, and everything. But yeah, I think Frank is probably one of Michael Mann's best characters in his movies, just because he feels like a real person, just like Neil McCauley kind of felt like a real person, and everything. And even though they were on the wrong side of the law, they did have, a certain way about them that you could relate to, and everything. I mean, I did talk a little bit earlier about how James Caan, how he revered this role and everything like that. And you can kind of see it in his performance, because there's an interview where he's talking about the movie, and he's basically talking about how he didn't say certain words, or he shortened his dialect to be very precise and specific about how he spoke. And it's kind of the way his approach to being a thief, really. He was very precise. So it's like every word that he said, it mattered. He made it count. Because I would say this, he's the reason why I kind of started to slow down my speaking. For anyone who listens to the podcast, and if you are a long-time listener and everything, you notice that I used to be rapid fire talking. Even when I would listen back to certain episodes, I was like, why was I talking so fast? But going back and watching Thief and everything, and then listening to James Caan talk about his performance in the movie and the way he spoke, I myself started to say, okay, let me do that, because for some reason that is how I've always been. I always was a fast talker, and and everything. So once I started to slow things down a bit, there's more clarity in what someone says when they speak. And if you speak a certain way, people do listen a lot more, I feel. So in a way, this movie influences me in my personal life or whatever. Let's talk a little bit about the supporting cast here, because we have Tuesday Weld as Jessie, who, like I say, she works very well with Caan. The scenes with them, some are very emotional, and one particular scene is funny. I will point out the scene where he shows up at the bar where she is, and you have the Mighty Joe Young playing they song, and he comes in. Well, first he's trying to park outside, which is funny because it's like, why is he struggling to park or whatever? But he's upset, so he's furious he can't really park the way he wants to. So he finally goes inside. She's sitting at the bar. He's like, okay, come on, let's go. It's like, I'm not going nowhere with you. And then you get William Peterson shows up for like 2 seconds as the bouncer who gets pushed off because he comes up, all right, pal, get out of here. And James Caan pulls a gun and it's like, not like, you get out of here, slick. And he pushes him off. And that's the last time you see William Peterson in the movie. But I thought it was funny that that's one of his earlier roles. And everything. So James Caan pretty much hoists his Tuesday Weld character up, and they leave. And then as they're leaving, these people, they see him pretty much being rough with us, so they try to get involved. He ends up pushing them away, like, y'all get the hell out of here, and everything like that. So he takes off driving, and she's like, what is the matter with you? And then he kind of goes into this whole thing about he was married and everything, but he's divorced, and he tells, like, you think what I do, like, what do you think that I do? It's like, I don't know. It's like, what do you think that I do? You think I'm able to dress the way I dress? I wear a gold Rolex watch based off of what you think I do? He's like, I am a thief and everything. And she's like, what? He's like, well, I want this to work with us. I want us to, I want you to come along on this crazy romance with me. And she listens like, what? And it's just like, scenes like that is hilarious. But it shows like they had like a real like chemistry with each other, and I thought she does a good job in the screen time that she's here. And I would say Tuesday Weld is one of those actresses that she was around at a specific time, and no, she did not have like the glitz and glamour roles of other actresses, but I thought that she was always a strong actress. Every movie that I've ever seen her in, I thought she does a really good job in the roles that she was given. I feel like she's a very underrated actress also. Next, talk about Robert Prosky, who he's probably best known for being the TV exec boss in Mrs. Doubtfire. Of course, that was years later, but ironically, this was his first movie. He was already like 50 when this movie was made, and everything. But like I said, it's interesting if you've seen Mrs. Doubtfire and see his character in that, who's like, oh, he's the nice older man and everything, that Daniel Robin Williams character gets drunk when they're at the restaurant and everything. And we see his character there, and then when you see him here as Leo, he seems like just a older guy that's nice and and everything. Seems like the older nice guy, and the goons are the ones that are really the bad guys. But he's just a nice guy that just operates this business. But then when things start to kind of spiral and everything, and when Frank turns him down and everything, he flips that switch and he becomes a complete madman in a way. And he's like, oh, I understand why these menacing dudes work for him, because he's the one that you really have to watch out for, because of the fact that he can flip that switch to, he's just an older guy. He's a nice older man. But that scene when they have Frank and everything, and they have him tied up, and because I always like the shot of where the camera is facing up, so it's him looking down to Frank and everything. He's talking to him. It's like, no, you're going to do what I tell you to do. And it's like, you're going to work for me. You're going to work for me until you can't work anymore. I'm going to use you up and everything. And it's just that menacing tone that he gives, and it's like, no, this is the real him. That nice guy persona that he was putting on, yeah, that's just a facade, but this is the real Leo, and everything. Another person to talk about is Willie Nelson. Willie Nelson, even though he has a small role in this movie, but I thought what he's given, that scene between the two of them when Frank goes to see Oakley, and everything, and just, that there's history between them, and like I say, he's his mentor, and also he's looked at as like a father figure, and everything, and just how Oakley is like, yeah, I'm pretty much dying, and I don't want to die in here. I want to, at least if I'm gonna die, I want to die on the street. I don't want to die locked up in here. And you can tell, like, these dudes, they had, they've known each other for a long time, and like I say, they're basically family. They're the closest thing to family to each other. And even though you don't get a lot of Willie Nelson's character, but you get the sense of the reason why Frank is the way he is because of the Oakley character, and the fact that when Frank and Jesse do get a baby, and everything, of course they get it on the black market type way, thanks to Leo, or whatever. But when they get the baby, they don't even know what they're going to name the baby. And then the fact that Oakley's real name was, his first name is David, so that's why he decided to name the baby David. So he named the baby after Willie Nelson's character. And like I say, even though it's a small role, but it's an impactful role, I thought. Another person to talk about is a young Jim Belushi, and in this movie he looks a lot like John. And I don't know this for a fact. This has always like been a theory of mine, is that maybe they wanted John Belushi to play this part, and John couldn't do it, or he probably didn't want to do it. So they got Jim because he looks exactly like his brother. And I always equate that to like the whole thing about the Baldwin brothers, of where, and this was something that was actually confirmed, that John Carpenter, he wanted Alec Baldwin to play in the movie Vampires. He wanted him to play that character that Daniel ends up playing. So you get Daniel Baldwin to play it, and it's like, well, it's not exactly Alec, but hey, he looks exactly like Alec, right? So he's a Baldwin, right? So I still got relatively the face that I wanted for that role, in a sense. And I feel like the same thing here with Jim playing Frank's number two, basically, and everything. And if you've only seen Jim Belushi like in comedy roles and everything, seeing him here again is very different from anything else that he's ever done, for the most part. I would say probably gang related with Jim and Tupac is probably the next time that you really see him in a role like this, and everything. And then the last person that I mentioned is like one of the early, if not his first role, talking about Dennis Farina, who went on to be a well-known actor and everything, like the character actor and everything. But he plays one of Leo's henchmen and everything, and he's around in two very important scenes in this movie, both dealing with somebody getting murdered, and everything. And it's kind of interesting seeing him play, this character, because years later he relatively would be the Leo character in Midnight Run to a degree, which is ironic because Chicago, and everything, and that's where this movie is taking place, in Chicago. And the fact that Dennis Farina was a Chicago police officer before he got into acting, and his next big movie after this would be Manhunter, where he plays I always forget, Crawford. He plays Jack Crawford in that, and everything, right? But it's interesting seeing him here, and like I say, he's a very scary looking man in this movie, because his hair is a lot longer and a lot blacker here, and he's wearing all black in the movie, and he's very, very scary looking man in this. Even though years later he would go on to play with some very funny roles in some movies, but in this he's a real scary looking dude, actually. So this movie is probably famous for the fact that it is the reason why movies that came after it started doing what they call wet downs. And what a wet down is basically when they would wet down the street at night to get that kind of shine and everything. And ironically enough, this is the movie that made that famous. So a lot of movies that came out in the 80s after this movie that had wet downs that was not even directed by Michael Mann, that when they would do the wet, it was because of this movie. So that's how this movie was influential and impact on other filmmakers and everything. And like I say, just the way the neon and everything, it just looks completely different from a lot of stuff that came out at this time. And it's always interesting when a director or filmmakers, I should say, whether it's the director, cinematographer, or whatever, they pretty much help, influence the industry in a way. You have certain ones who do that. Throughout history, there are certain ones that kind of help influence the industry like that, and that's definitely what Michael Mann and his cinematographer for this, Donald Thorns, I believe is his name. They help influence the industry in a very positive way, because the whole wet down thing, it does make like the nighttime scenes look, very unique and very different, and it adds to the movie, I feel, and everything. And then another thing too is Michael Mann is probably best known for how he approaches his movies, and the reason why a lot of the stuff in his movies looks very authentic in a way is because of his own prep and precision to movies. The fact that if you pay attention to a number of his lead characters, they all have the same type of precision when it comes to using a firearm, especially a handgun. They all have that same type of way about them. I would say that Frank in this movie, Will Graham in Manhunter, Neil McCauley in Heat, they all Tom Cruise in Collateral. Yeah, they all have that same type of precision about them, and it's because they use a real person who trains people how to use a firearm and everything. And from my understanding, that this guy, he actually trained like Navy SEALs and people like that of how to use a firearm, how to enter a room, basically, and everything, clear a room and everything. So they all have that same type of draw, that same type of timing or whatever. And if you really pay attention to it, you do see it with those characters, that they all have the same unique style about it. And it's, again, you don't really see that when it comes to other movies or whatever, because most times you got people just I'm going here, just coming here like a wild man. But I would say probably like what you see in the John Wick movies and everything, with the whole precision and how they brandish firearms and how they clear a room and stuff like that. It's very tactical. I would say is because of what we get in Michael Mann movies and stuff like that. And you could almost say that the whole thing about precision and timing and execution from Michael Mann's standpoint is kind of bleeds over into his main characters in a lot of ways. And then also too, the whole thing about the safecracking, which I did not know or whatever until I was doing research really for this episode, is that they actually did have James Caan break into the safes. That was not like movie magic. It was actually him really cracking the safes and everything like that. So they really had, because on the movie they actually had a few people who were actually thieves in real life. So they knew how to, of course, crack a safe. Matter of fact, I think the guy who plays one of the cops and everything, he was a real safe cracker. So that's the reason why he has a role in the movie. And it's ironic that even though in real life he was a safe cracker, but in the movie he plays a cop, a dirty cop at that, and everything. But yeah, so you get to really see like how authentic, it is to crack into a safe, especially old safes and everything, and listening to them in interviews talk about like how those safes were and everything. It's like, yeah, you really had to know what the hell you was doing. You couldn't just be no geek off the street basically trying to say, I'm gonna break into a safe. Like, yeah, all right, yeah, and that's why you doing 25 years right now, because you couldn't get into a freaking safe, and everything. But I would say that even though I've talked about it a little bit, Thief, pretty much, it influenced, like I say, a lot of movies that came after it. I would say that it influenced the whole crime film genre, the modern crime film genre, and everything. So yeah, like certain movies that you watch, you definitely see Thief's influence and impact on it without even realizing it until you go back and watch Thief. If you've never seen Thief and you go back and you watch it, and then if you've seen other movies that came out after, it's like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, oh wow, you do one of those type of things. Oh wow, it's kind of like the Owen Wilson. Oh wow, type of thing. And then let's talk about the fact that this movie, it shows like how when one person when they are like obsessed with having the perfect life, and you realize there's no such thing as called the perfect life, is a good life or a bad life, but the perfect life. But when you get the obsession that Frank kind of gets with, he wants to have the perfect life because he wants to have the perfect wife, he wants to have the perfect child, he wants to pretty much put everything that he's been doing that he knows how to do, he wants to put that aside, which is him being a thief, so he can just have this perfect life with his perfect little family. But unfortunately, the old things seem to hang on, and the whole thing about being perfect goes away, and it just becomes life, and everything. And this movie does that. That is something that's like a overarching theme of the movie, is Frank's obsession with, I'm just trying to get out of this life. It's kind of the same thing with Carlito's Way, of where, okay, I don't want to be a part of that life anymore because I'm trying to get to this thing that I consider to be the perfect life. And unfortunately, it does not become, it's not the thing that happens. Same thing with Neil McCauley in Heat. He has this vision of what he want his life to be, but the old things just seem to hang on, and, unfortunately, life happens. And everything. And then also too, the cost of being your own man, because as I mentioned earlier about how, Frank sees himself as being his own man and everything. And when Leo pretty much tries to son him basically, and another scene with James Caan as Frank that I really enjoy is the scene when Leo is basically trying to little boy him, basically son him, like own him basically. When it's like, man, it's like, wait a minute, you supposed to be paying me this amount. You give me, I'm gonna give you half now, and then I give you the other half. You do another job for me, and it's like, man, give me all my money. Stop playing with me. It's like that's not what the deal was, and of course Leo takes that, not so kindly, and unfortunately, that's where things really begin to spiral. With Frank and even with Leo and everything spirals out of control because of that whole misunderstanding from Frank. I mean, not from Frank, but from Leo. It's like, no, he's his own. Frank is his own man. Leo wants everyone to work for him or that he owns them, because even in the scene when he's talking to Frank after he pretty much has him at gunpoint and everything, he's telling him, it's like, that wife of yours, like, she'll be like, he'll make her a whore and all this type of stuff, and that child, that, like, I got that for you. It's basically like, I own you and I'm going to own you, and that wasn't Frank's mentality or whatever, and everything. And how the fact that he didn't have a compromise and everything, and he pretty much burns everything down, and everything, which is unfortunate. I don't want to spoil the finale. If you've never seen it, I don't want to spoil it, so I won't even really go into it. But a lot of what happens at the end is because of the fact that Frank has to be his own man and he has to do things his way. There is no compromise to it. Yeah, so let's get into talking about, like I said, I'm trying to do my best of not spoiling because I do want people to actually watch the movie. So yes, I've talked about a few things, but I have not spoiled like major things. So if you have seen the movie, you can continue to listen. If you have not seen the movie, I am going to mention a few spoilery things. So if you haven't seen the movie, you can skip this part, or you can stop it right here, go watch the movie, and then come back and pick up from where you left off right here. So this is the spoiler zone, basically. So the fact that after Leo pretty much, he kidnaps, they kidnap Jim Belushi's character after Frank pretty much like, I'm not doing what you want me to do. After he kidnaps him, and then when Frank shows up to the car lot and everything, and they end up killing Jim Belushi character, and it's done in slow motion. I mean, it's very visceral. I mean, he gets shot with a shotgun from behind, basically, and he dies, and then that's when they kidnap Frank, and that's when Leo gives the monologue about him owning him, and that he's gonna own him until he's all used up and everything like that. And after that is where Frank pretty much, he gets with Jesse and it's like, no, you got to get out of here and everything. And he sends her away. And I feel like the movie does this thing where I don't really like it, but you understand it, because if you really pay attention to the Frank character, you understand this is kind of how his life has been for some time, and it's probably why his marriage went the way it went, is because when he decides to get revenge against Leo and his goons, he sends Jesse and the baby away, and you don't even know if he goes and get back with them because they're gone. So when he goes there to Leo's house and he takes out the goons and everything in a that final shootout, I think, is probably one of the best, in, like I say, with the slow motion, but also too, you get the precision of how Frank operates his gun and everything. And it's that cool shot of James Caan out on the street, because this all takes place in a neighborhood. And it's like, how the hell nobody heard this? Because you got machine guns and you got handguns just firing off, and these ain't no silent, no quiet guns by no stretch. And this is in a residential area that this happens, where he guns down the one guy in the street. And that's when Dennis Farina and the other goon that has like the automatic weapons, they show up. He kills the other guy quick. You thought he killed Dennis Farina, but Dennis Farina bleeding out or whatever. He gets up and he actually does shoot Frank. But Frank is wearing a bulletproof vest. He goes down, and then he kills Dennis Farina character. And then that's when you realize he had on the bulletproof vest. He takes off his jacket. And then he just walks down the street. And that's how the movie ends, with him walking into the night and everything. And it's like, that's kind of a bittersweet ending, and everything. But he is out. I mean, he took out this little small, crime organization basically, but he's out. But look what it cost him basically. So it goes back to that whole thing of the cost of being your own man, because he literally burns down the house that him and Jesse lived in before he left. He burned it all down and everything. So there was no traces of him or anything like that, and everything. But I feel like it fits his character. Even though me personally, I don't really like that the movie has this bittersweet ending. I mean, it's a great ending, but it's a bittersweet ending just because Frank he's back in the position that he was relatively before the movie starts, in a way. And now he has to build something up again. And it's like, well, is he going to go find Jesse and the baby? We don't know. Or is he just going to go get a new crew, find a new woman and everything, and just start all over until that doesn't work out and he has to just burn it all up again, and everything. And like I say, if you've never seen, and if you have seen the movie, but if you've never seen the ending of the movie, okay, so we're out of the spoiler zone now. If you've never seen the end of the movie, and everything, it is, like I say, it's a great, from I would say from the time that they leave out the house, that final shootout that's out on the street and everything, I would say that is like some of the best like film making that you probably ever seen. Granted, there's a lot of movies that have kind of borrowed from this, but as far as I'm pretty sure watching it in 1981, you probably like, oh my god, like this is the greatest thing I've ever seen. And I mean, even now, years later, it's still like some of the best that you've ever seen, just because of the timing and how everything plays out, and everything like that. So, kind of getting towards the end here, but going to go into talking about the fact that this movie does have it influenced a lot of movies. I know I mentioned that earlier about the influence of certain movies and things like that. If you look at, I would say if you look at movies like Drive, there's some influence from Thief and Drive. The character that Ryan Gosling plays, he's like a Frank type character where he's his own man and he doesn't want to be sunned by anybody either. Nobody's gonna own him pretty much, and we see what happens in Drive when they try to do that with him and how he kind of burns everything down in that movie as well. So yeah, there are parallels between Thief and Drive if you really think about it, because again, the character that what is her name? I can't remember her name right now. I can see her face, but she plays the she's the lead actress in Drive. Jeez, my mind is going bad or something. I don't know. But same thing with that, her and her son, and how the driver pretty much becomes like the surrogate father once Oscar Isaac character gets taken out and everything. He's like the surrogate father, but then when things go bad, he has to pretty much burn everything down, and everything. And then also too, I would say that the town, in a way, the town is almost like Heat, to some degree, but there's also some Thief in it as well. And like with the Ben Affleck character in that, he's trying to, he wants a better, perfect life. And ironically enough, in that movie, he does and doesn't get his perfect life, which I need to watch The Town again, because as I'm talking about it now, I need to revisit The Town. Who knows, maybe at some point I'll do it on the podcast, because that is a great movie, or whatever. But yeah, there are similarities. Like I say, you can see the influence of other characters in other movies that's outside of the Michael Mann universe or whatever, that you can say, oh yeah, there's some Frank in them, basically, and everything. And I mean, it is a movie that, if you notice that in recent years, this is kind of the reason why Thief has kind of been talked about again, is because like you hear filmmakers who have come along that are talking about it. Probably most famously is if you've watched the Criterion Closet, where Ryan Coogler is in the Criterion Closet, and he's talking about Thief and talking about how much of an influence that movie was on him, and watching. So it's almost like, damn, I would love to see Ryan Coogler do a movie based off of the influence of Thief. I would love to see what that would look like, because just looking at what Ryan Coogler has done so far, and everything, he's a very good filmmaker, and he's on his way to becoming a great filmmaker. And I would say with Sinners, he's on that path, and everything. But I would love to see if he made a movie that was like through and through influenced by Michael Mann's Thief. I would love to see him do a movie like that. And then also what he considers to be his filmmaking mentor, Christopher Nolan, who is heavily influenced by Michael Mann. And I mean, The Dark Knight is virtually his version of Heat and everything. And once you really boil and think about that, Batman is pretty much Al Pacino's Vincent Hanna character, and the Joker is Neil McCauley to an extreme degree, of course, but it's all right there. And so for both of those filmmakers to be Ryan Coogler's like inspiration and everything, like I said, I would love for him to do something like Thief. It doesn't have to be this big elaborate movie, but just something with the influence of that. I would love to see what he could do based off of the influence of Thief and also off the influence of Christopher Nolan, which, like I said, Sinners is I feel like is on that trajectory. And like I said, I would love to see him do something like that. But there's other filmmakers who have talked about Michael Mann and Thief and everything in recent years. And I think that's one reason why the movie is kind of starting to get like a lot of traction and talk about, because some of your favorites now are talking about the influence that it had on them and everything. So it is very much, I feel, an essential watch. If you are a film lover and everything like that, I say Thief is definitely a movie that you should watch and appreciate what the movie is. Because, I mean, for me, when I watched it, it definitely it's an influence on me, as I talked about earlier, thanks to how James Caan's character he speaks. It kind of got me to the point of where, okay, let me slow down my speech pattern to a degree and everything. So that's one way it's an influence on me, and also how I look at movies and things of that nature. Thief is one of those movies that kind of make me look at movies in a different light or whatever. So that's pretty much it for this episode. Like I say, definitely check out the movie. If I had to rate the movie out of 5 safes, I should say out of 5 safes cracked, I would give it is a solid 4.5. And I don't give it the 5 just because I feel like the ending is a bittersweet ending. So, and that's not even really a knock again. It's just my personal thing about how the movie ends. I would have liked to see, Frank get his perfect life, but like I said earlier, there's no such thing as a perfect life. And everything, especially if you watch certain movies, because when a character gets obsessed with perfect life, it definitely does not end in a perfect way. But that's the only reason why I give it a 4.5 is just because of the ending, which is not saying that the movie is not great. Otherwise, the movie is a 5. It's a 5 out of 5 for me. But like I say, my personal rating is a 4.5 just because of that. And I would ask the listeners this question. I already asked this question on social medias and everything. As far as Michael Mann, if you're someone who watched Michael Mann movies and everything, what is your favorite Michael Mann movie? So if you're listening on YouTube, comment down below what your favorite Michael Mann movie is, and everything. My favorite, if you listen to the Heat episode, you know that Heat is my favorite. And I am very much a big supporter of his movie Ali as well. And Thief is definitely up there. I would almost say that my top 3 is Heat, Thief, and Ali. Ironically, all of them are single title movies, but those are my top 3. But I would love to know what you guys' favorite Michael Mann movies are. So like I say, if you listen on YouTube, comment down below what you think, what your favorite Michael Mann movie is. For everyone else, you can hit me up on Instagram at JMT Podcast and let me know what you think your favorite Michael Mann movie is. Also on Threads, I'm over on Threads, either at J Movie Talk or my personal page, The J Giles on Threads. You can let me know what you think. What is your favorite Michael Mann movie? And everything. So thank everyone for listening. I will be back next episode to talk about a movie that I don't think anyone's ever covered. At least on the podcast that I listen to, I haven't heard anyone cover this movie. And I'm talking about Fatal Beauty, starring Whoopi Goldberg and Sam Elliott and a young Brad Dourif and everything. Directed by Tom Holland, not Spider-Man Tom Holland, but Child's Play and Fright Night's director Tom Holland, and everything. That will be the next episode, and everything like that. You can follow me, of course, all over social media, on Instagram, like I said, at J Movie Talk. On my personal page, The J Giles. Pretty much all socials, whether it's the podcast or me personally, it's all either J Movie Talk or The J Giles. And the biggest thing, because I did say in the last episode that I have an announcement. So I am officially over on Twitch. I did a recording yesterday, and everything, just to get kind of used to talking in front of the camera, things like that, because I'm so used to just recording the podcast and being very faceless and everything. But I've decided to put my face back out there. Again, haven't done that since the old YouTube days, and everything. But I decided to start up a Twitch account, and like I said, I did for like an hour and a half. Had a good little test run, and everything. So you will be getting more of me doing Twitch, and I would say as of this recording, I will be doing another stream here this week, and I will put all the links and everything out there for people if you want to check me out on Twitch and everything. I'm going to be talking about some more stuff from this movie on Twitch, kind of going more in depth and with some of the stuff I didn't talk about, and everything, and then some other movie stuff, and like wherever the conversations kind of lead for the most part. And, just kind of want to do something a little different and everything. So definitely follow me on Twitch, come and support and everything. And if you just want to watch and you want to interact and everything, I'm very appreciative of it, and everything. Just like how you guys support me with the podcast, hopefully you will continue to support me with Twitch and everything like that. Like I say, next episode 349, will be Fatal Beauty. Until next time, peace.